Good afternoon, student. Welcome in the AVV Digital Classroom. We are learning Indian economy subject, in which we have learned the objectives of planning, objectives of economic planning, historical review of planning, and in the objective of economic planning, we have learned the 4 long-term objectives. So these were the 4 long-term objectives. So today we are learning, or we are understanding, or we are evaluating the long-term objective of planning. So on paper, the long-term objective of the Indian planning appear to be perfectly sound and worth achieving. While the first two are economic objective and relates to increase in income and employment. The last two are social objectives and relate to the distribution of wealth and income in the establishment of an egalitarian society in the country. Okay, so these were the objectives, and we are going to evaluate the long-term objective of the economic planning. But these two sets of objectives obviously conflict with each other. For some instance, the objective of rapid economic growth based on heavy investment and development of capital intensive production could raise national income, but was bound to lead the consumption of wealth and income and accentuation of income disparities. It means the first two objectives are related to economic planning, but if we see the production could raise national income, but was bound to lead the concentration of wealth and income of and create the income disparities. In practice, only the first objective, that is rapid economic development, was given real importance in all the plans, and the other objectives were either underplayed or simply neglected. We had earlier indicated or discussed how even the employment objective was not given much importance in the plans. Since the rate of saving was considered inadequate to match the rate of investment required for providing employment to everyone. Rapid economic growth implied the choice of capital intensive techniques, which generated surplus for rapid growth. But this obviously hampered certain of new jobs on the one hand and accentuate inequalities of income and wealth on the other. It was this preoccupation with the first objective of rapid economic growth which prevented the Indian planners from opting for labor-intensive techniques which would have created extensive employment opportunities. The Indian planners assumed all along that if the country achieved rapid economic progress and increase in production, it would be possible to bring about a better distribution of income and a higher standard of living for all over a period of time. The fourth plan document, which carried the importance of Professor D.R. Gadgil, and it stated, to some extent, income disparities can be reduced through fiscal measures aiming at reduction of income at the top level. But for us, it is important to lay far greater stress on positive steps for ameliorating the conditions of poor people through planned economic development. In a rich country, greater equality could be achieved in part by transfer of income through fiscal, pricing, and other policies. No significant result can be achieved through such measures in a poor countries, where whatever surpluses can be mobilized from the higher income of rich classes are needed for investment in the economy to lay the basis of larger consumption in the future. So this was stated by Dr. Gadgil. Thus, India's 5-year plan had always given the higher priority to income growth, or we can say a higher priority to the economic growth, and all other objectives were given only lip service, thus they are ignored. So this was the evolution, it's very short evolution of the long-term objective of the planning. So now we will learn step by step the different concept related to the Indian economy and Indian economic planning. So the next is democratical socialism in India. So what is democratical socialism in India? We understand with the features of it. So the theoretical basis of socialism was provided by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who believed that to end exploitation from the world, it was necessary to abolish private ownership of the means of production. Marx and Engels considered private property to be the cause of all social and economic evils. According to them, according to Karl Marx, we know that Karl Marx was the socialist economist, and he always believed in the socialism. And what did he say? He said that the cause of all social and economic evils are privatization only, the private property. The cause for all social and economic evils is private properties. Following the ideas of Marx and Engels, economic planning based on total nationalization was adopted as the mean to foster economic growth in Soviet Russia. For the first time in the history of mankind, the Soviet government made a concentrated effort to end poverty, hunger, and unemployment. According to carefully prepared economic plan. The success of the plan in the initial years and the rate at which Soviet Russia industrialized itself rapidly since 1928 was a great and high rate of growth in Soviet Russia was accompanied by enormous human sacrifices in the form of liquidation of countless millions of people branded as enemies of socialism. They were branded as enemies of socialism and brutal suppressions of individual freedom. The tremendous progress achieved by the Soviet Union had an impact on the capitalist countries of the world also. The Great Depression of 1929 to 33 destroyed people's faith in the operation of price mechanism. Price mechanism is laissez-faire. So, as an automatic self-adjusting mechanism, Keynes' book, The End of Laissez-Faire, and his public works program made a tremendous and epoch-making influence in it creates influence in abandoning non-interventionism and setting in an era of positive role of the state in the economic and social life of the people. So he emphasized, or he has given importance to the state, that the intervention of state as well as intervention of government is important in the social life of people. Although the capitalist government did not lose faith in private property and individual freedom, yet they were convinced that the government could play an effective role in reducing and eventually removing poverty, misery, unemployment, and ignorance. When India became independent, the Indian people were steeped in mass poverty, unemployment, and underemployment. India had an illiterate and untrained labor force, static agriculture with semi-feudal relations, and a comparatively less developed industrial sector, and woefully inadequate infrastructure in the form of poor transportation and communication, energy and power, banking and finance, etc. Thus, India's problem required a big national effort, and therefore India adopted planning as a lever of social and economic change. Jawaharlal Nehru ji, the architect of Indian planning, greatly admired the achievements of Soviet planning and so borrowed the concept of socialism from the Russian. But he also regarded the domestic values of the capitalist society as indispensable for the full growth of a just society. Thus, in his endeavor to take advantage of the virtues of the two extreme societies, which were themselves also undergoing a transformation, Nehru's version of the new India was described as democratic socialism. Socialism was democracy are the means for the creation of society. Okay, socialism and democracy are the means for the creation of society in India, in which all have equal opportunities to education, healthcare, employment, etc., and exploitation of one class by other is abolished. To foster free and fuller growth of human personalities is the supreme goal of democratic socialism. If poverty, inequalities of income and wealth are conceived of an obstacle to the realization of this supreme goal, then it is equally true that the absence of democracy is also an impediment to the realization of the supreme goal. It is therefore of vital significance to reconcile the ideas of socialism and democracy so as to evolve a new pattern of society in which man can realize his self or his innate nature in a fuller manner, as also attain a higher standard of material comfort. The disintegration of Soviet Russia and political and economic upheavals in other East European socialist countries, resulting in the introduction of market-based economies, have proved that the vision of Nehru was conceived of holistic approach to development, rather than having a biz only in favor of economic forces, neglecting the urge for freedom and democracy as a part of the development process. India too has been liberalizing its economy, reducing government controls and regulations, but at the same time, not throwing overboard the Nehruvian ideology of democratic process of dialogue and consensus. The features of democratic socialism, this is the base for it. Before we start the features, this was the base, that how the socialism and democratic can be joined together. And before it is the features of democratic socialism, the philosophy of democratic socialism is based on a total vision of society. It implies that material property alone cannot make human life rich and meaningful. Okay, so this philosophy is based on that material prosperity alone cannot make human life rich and meaningful. Along with the provision of a higher standard of material comfort and well-being, it is imperative that all citizens should have equal opportunities, wherein ethical and spiritual values needed for the enrichment of the individual and the communal life can be developed. So the fourth plan memorandum in this context stressed the need for establishment a progressive and rapidly growing economy based on high level of productivity. The application of science and technology and the use of manpower resources and a truly democratic and a socialist society in which the burden and the benefits are widely and justly shared. Thus, along with a proposal for maximizing production, a program of action towards reducing economic and social disparities, ensuring a national minimum to the people is an integral part of this philosophy. So the principal feature of democratic socialism, so first is faith in democratical value for enrichment of the individual and communal life. The concept of democratic socialism as conceived in India believes in democratic values for the enrichment of the individual and communal life. The objectives democratic before socialism sharply distinguish it from the socialism practice in total economies. Only a democratic society provides adequate opportunities to the individual for self-expression. So this is the first feature of democratic socialism, that only the democratic society provide adequate opportunity to the individual or self expressions. Okay, so faith in democratical values for enrichment of the individual and communal life. Second, a socialist society aims at the removal of poverty and the provision of national minimum. Socialism can have meaning to the poverty stricken masses only if it can assure the provision of basic needs of every individual and can guarantee in the near future a national minimum in respect of food, clothing, shelter, medical, medical aid, and education. The provision of a national minimum was incorporated as one of the goal of the fourth plan and of the successive 5-year plan. So third feature, a socialist economy aims at the reduction of inequality of income and wealth. Okay, so a socialist economy aims at the reduction of inequality of income and wealth. Socialism is essentially a movement for redistribution of income in favor of the laboring classes of the society. Unless the share of labor in national income improves significantly, socialism can have no meaning to the masses. The growth of trade union pressure does not help to improve the share of labor, but trade unions do not exist in such sectors as agriculture and cottage and small scale industries. Consequently, in a planned economy, it is essential to lay down a policy to bring about education, to bring about, reduction of inequalities of income and wealth. The second 5-year plan observed the process of reducing inequalities in a twofold. It must raise incomes at the lowest level and it must simultaneously reduce the income at the top. The former is basically the more important aspect, but early and purposeful action in regard to the second aspect is also called for. The third characteristics of democratical socialism in India, a socialist economy aims at the reduction of inequality of income and wealth. Okay, so the fourth is a socialist economy aims at the provision of equal opportunity to all. All citizens, irrespective of caste, class, or birth, should enjoy equally opportunity. One of the basic conditions for equality of opportunities and for achieving a national minimum is the provision of gainful employment for every able-bodied citizen. The problem of unemployment in India is on account of fundamental deficiencies in the Indian economic structure. The most important deficiency is the failure of the Indian economy to raise investment to a level adequate for full employment. This calls forth a great sacrifice on the part of the community. Besides this, due to excessive pressure of population on land, underemployment exists in the rural areas. The unemployed rural labor moves continuously to urban areas, creating heavy congestion, squalor, and misery. So the unemployment rural labor moves continuously to urban areas, creating heavy congestion, squalor, and misery. In order that the country's human resources are utilized to the full, expansion of industries is essential to increase the absorptive capacity of the economy. In addition to this, a large-scale program of rural works in density popularized or populated areas and for period of underemployment during slack session is of vital significance to provide continuous work to the rural labor force. To help the less privileged classes, it is necessary that expansion of facilities of educating or education takes place and that every child is able to pursue a course of education most suitable for this ability and intelligence. Provision of free and universal or universal provision of free and universal education at the primary stage, extension of opportunities for technical and higher education, the liberal grant of scholarship to the weaker section, and other forms of aid can go a long way in removing the disadvantage causes by birth. Faith in a mixed economy. The philosophy for democratic socialism does not consider the total abolition of private properties as desirable or necessary. Only when private ownership comes into serious conflict with common good, it should be either replaced by public ownership or by a suitable form of cooperative ownership. Okay, so private only uh, it does not mean that private ownership is exactly bad for the economy. They have accepted both socialism and as well as private opportunities and private property together. According to them, private ownership come into serious conflict when the when the when it replaced by when it creates conflicts when it creates conflicts. So the relative roles of the public and private sector in a developing country have been outlined in the second 5-year plan in the following words. The words are: in a growing scope for both the public and the private sectors to expand sorry, I am repeating the words again of second 5-year plan. In a growing economy which gets increasingly diversified, there is a scope for both the public and private sector to expand simultaneously. But it is inevitable if development is to proceed at the pace envisaged and to contribute effectively to the attainment of the larger social ends in a view that the public sector must grow up. Public sector must grow up not only absolutely but also relatively to the private sector. However, the leading role of the public sector in economic development is not accepted in the era of liberalization and globalization in the Indian economy. So next characteristics is a socialist economy endeavors to check concentration of economic power and the growth of monopolistic tendencies. The growth of large-scale industrial units is responsible to a great extent in the emergence of monopolistic tendencies. And as a result, new entrepreneurs find it impossible to enter such industries. Moreover, the concentration, moreover the what I have to say, moreover the concentration of economic power in the hands of a few individuals is the very negation of the principle of socialism. It is therefore essential to devise way of means to contract the growth of monopolistic combinations through first extension of the public sector into the field requiring the establishment of a large scale unit and heavy investment, establishment of large scale unit and investments. Second, widening of opportunities for new entrants, setting up of a medium and small size unit as well, or we can say as well as industries organized on cooperative lines, on effective exercise of government power of control and regulation and use of appropriate fiscal measures. So the objective briefly must be not merely to prevent concentration of economic power and the growth of monopolistic tendencies, but also to promote a pattern of industrial organization which will lead to high level of productivity and give full scope within the framework of national planning to new entrepreneurs, to medium and small scale enterprises, and to cooperative organs. The last feature of democratic socialist or socialism in India is the basic criteria of economic decision in a socialist economy is not private profit but social gain. The second plan states essentially this. It states that essentially this means that the basic criteria for determining the lines of advance must not be private profit but social gain, and that the pattern of development and the structure of social economic relations be so planned that they result not only in appreciable increase in national income and employment but also greater equality in incomes and wealth. Major decision re-equality in income, or we can say that major equations must be related to the decision pre-grading production, distribution, consumption and investment, and in fact all significant socio-economic relationship must be made by agencies informed by social purpose. In a mixed economy where the public and the private sector have both to play a part in economic development, The criteria of public investment take a more comprehensive view of the requirements of the economy. But in the private sector, the decision about investment are made by consideration of cost and returns. It is therefore necessary that appropriate economic policies be developed so that investment in the private sector too broadly conform to the social platform conceived in the plan. So the second 5-year plan states there are, broadly speaking, two types of techniques through which the objectives in a new have to be attained. So these views, we can say, firstly, there is an overall regulation of economic activity through fiscal and monetary policy. And secondly, we can say there are devices like export and import controls, licensing of industries or trades, price control and allocation which influence and regulate economic activity in particular sector or subsector of the economy. So we conclude the democratic socialism in India and its characteristics, or we can say features. So we can say the process of planned economic development while preserving the institutions of democracy and private enterprises is a complex and difficult. It is only a courageous and purposive leadership which can create conditions suitable for rapid economic growth and at the same time retain the institutions of a vibrant democracy. The contradiction inherent in the mixed capitalist enterprises system hinder the achievement of the goals of economic planning. The process of economic development can move smoothly if the roles of the private, public, and cooperative sectors are clearly defined, and also if efforts are made to important and the efforts are made to implement plan programs effectively. So these were the feature of democratical socialism in India. We have completed. In the next lecture, we will learn India as a mixed economy. Okay, today how the socialism enter in the Indian planning we have learned, and we will learn what is mixed economy, how we can say that India is a mixed economy, what are the features of Indian economy. Thank you one and all.